Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the first qualifying day of 2025. We have been waiting for this moment for, 3 months basically? And finally, it is here. 2025 Formula One season is almost a go, and looking at practice so far, it looks like 2025 might just deliver the close competition that we really are after. It's been a very close competitive weekend, and qualifying here in Melbourne should be pretty exciting in what is a very hot day in Melbourne. It is over 35 degrees Celsius at the track. Hopefully Nib, my usual co-commentator and contributor who's at the track, is coping well. But yeah, it is very hot, and hopefully it will be a great day of competitiveness through the field for the fans at the track and for the fans across the world, and obviously for us watching along here. Yeah, cannot wait for this. It should be really a close battle throughout the field. Obviously, close battle for pole, and then for the all the rest of the positions, especially in the upper parts of the midfield, it's looking very, very close. Practice 3, by the way, did finish about an hour ago. I will go through the results of practice 3 in a moment. But yeah, I cannot wait for this session. Hopefully you guys are as excited as I am. And no matter what time zone it is in your part of the world, hopefully you're all having as best time as possible. It is currently 3:30 in the morning where I'm at here in the UK. And yeah, qualifying gets underway in just under 90 minutes from now. And what we're going to do in this build up to qualifying is pretty much go over what we went through in the qualifying preview stream, which if you didn't check that out, don't worry, because like I said, we're going to go through basically the same data and information. I won't probably go through it for as long as I did a few hours ago, but we'll go through it anyway, just so you guys can understand what's been happening this weekend, who's looking quick, who isn't, and, what should likely happen in qualifying. And of course, I'll give my predictions ahead of the session. And then in just over an hour and 25 minutes from now, we'll get into the session itself and we'll see just how it all ends up. As currently at the track, we've got the F2, I think, sprint race, I think it is. And it's already been quite chaotic. So, yeah, great weekend of action for the fans at the track. But as well, I do have, guys, a poll running in the chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position for the Australian Grand Prix? Will it be Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, or Max Verstappen? Out of those four, who takes pole position? Let me know in that poll. And then probably right before we get to Q3, which will be just over a couple hours from now, I will finish up the poll and we'll see who you guys have voted for. Leclerc, I believe, won the poll earlier that I did during my qualifying preview. We'll see if that remains the same, especially if some of the practice 3 results. But I don't, unfortunately, have a graphic to go through for the practice 3 results, but I will read out what the results are. Let me just quickly get them up. By the way, hello to everyone in the chat. Good to see you all. Obviously, us hardcore lot here for the, first qualifying of the season, despite the time of, I wouldn't say day, but, despite the time. And by the way, Rooks, my mic should be okay. If I sound quieter, it's probably because I have had a few hours of sleep and my voice is just not in as good of action. And plus, when the watch-along gets underway, or not the watch-along, when we get to the session itself, just a pre-warning, because it is 5 a.m. and I do live in a neighborhood, I'm not going to be going absolutely bonkers on the microphone. Same for tomorrow. I will try and react as maybe as much as I can get away with, but I don't want to be screaming my head off at the middle of the night, especially on a weekend. So yeah, just a heads up on that one. But yeah, the results of practice 3. Let me just go through them. So Oscar Piastri ended up quickest on a 1:15.9, and then you had George Russell only 0.04 of a second slower, and suddenly Mercedes a lot quicker. We'll go through what they did yesterday on their best lap time, but yeah, 1:15.9 Mercedes doing in practice 3. So maybe yesterday they were just really holding back. We'll have to see. Max Verstappen third at a 1:16.0, just about within a tenth of Piastri. Red Bull definitely have improved their car. Leclerc in fourth, Ferrari lagging behind a bit, but I think they've got more pace there. Antonelli in fifth, and then Sainz sixth, Albon seventh. Williams looking quite a bit quicker than they were in practice 2. Hamilton 8th, still lagging behind his teammate Leclerc. This time only a couple tenths of a second, as opposed to 4 tenths of a second in practice 2. And then Yuki Tsunoda 9th, Lando Norris in 10th, and then Bortoletto in 11th, impressively. And then Gasly, Hadjar, Stroll, Doohan, Hulkenberg, Alonso, Ocon, and then Behrman and Lawson did not complete a lap time. So, yeah, those are the practice 3 results. I will go through the results of practice 2. And, yeah, a lot of the teams did do their best lap times of the weekend so far in practice 3. So I will compare that just to see whether maybe certain teams have indeed improved. My predictions, though, which I'll get on to soon, are based really on what we saw from the Friday running. So I am fully prepared to be quite wrong, especially if Mercedes and Red Bull have improved quite a bit more than maybe I expected them to. I thought Mercedes and Red Bull would be better today than they were yesterday by a decent amount, but yeah, Mercedes especially looking quite a bit stronger than I expected. So yeah, we'll get into all of that soon enough. But let me hide the timer. We'll come back to this part of the screen soon enough. Let's just go through what happened in practice 2. So the best time of the weekend so far in practice 3, a 1:15.9. Leclerc doing a 1:16.4 in practice 2, and a tenth of a second or so ahead of the 2 McLarens. I still think it's likely to be Ferrari versus McLaren for pole, despite Red Bull and Mercedes' possible improvement. Yuki Tsunoda 4th, Racing Bulls, I mean, we're still in the top 10 in practice 3, so I still think they've got legit good pace. Hamilton 5th, definitely still needs to improve. I mean, we saw him closer to Leclerc in practice 3, which is at least a plus. We'll see if he gets even closer in qualifying. Isaac Hadjar 6th, Max Verstappen 7th, as I explained yesterday, and I'll explain again. He was leaving, and Red Bull were leaving more time on the table yesterday. So there was always going to be a bit of an improvement from Max. Hulkenberg in 8th. I still don't think Sauber are going to be in the top 10. I think it was a bit of a fluke what we saw yesterday with Hulkenberg. Lance Stroll 9th, Aston Martin appearing to be quicker yesterday than they were today, or so far today. And then George Russell in P10, and Russell again in practice 3 did a 1:15.9. In practice 2 did a 1:17.2. So that's an improvement of 1.3 seconds, which is not normal from practice 2 to practice 3 to improve lap time wise by that much. So either Mercedes were sandbagging quite heavily, or they have found a new setup that has, meant massive improvement for Mercedes. We'll have to see in qualifying. But yeah, a big, big improvement for them. Also, looking at Max, he did a 1:17.0 in practice 2. And then in practice 3, a 1:16.0, so a 1 second gain of lap time for Red Bull. McLaren were half a second quicker, or just over half a second quicker actually, in practice 3 than they were compared to practice 2. Ferrari only, I think, 2 or 3 tenths. So yeah, certain teams improving a lot, others not so much, but yeah, we'll get into what that could mean going into qualifying. And then the rest of the order, you had Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, Williams. In practice 3, Williams did a 1:16.2, when in practice 2, it was a 1:17.3, I think. So again, a 1 second a lap improvement from Williams, just like Red Bull. So again, maybe they were just sandbagging a bit on Friday, or maybe they just have found a lot more grip today so far compared to yesterday. Alonso 13th, and then Doohan 14th, Gasly 15th, Antonelli 16th. Obviously, he's improved quite a bit from yesterday. Lawson 17th. Of course, he only did a couple laps in practice 3. He is having a real disaster of a weekend. Bortoletto 18th, Ocon 19th, and Oliver Behrman didn't participate yesterday in practice 2 because of a big crash he had in practice 1. And then in practice 3, he crashed again and only did 2 laps. So Behrman is having an absolute stinker of a weekend. He really has got to step it up. I know the Haas car is really not looking good, but yeah, 2 crashes in 3 practice sessions, and missing another practice session because of a crash. That is pretty much the worst possible way to start a race weekend. So yeah, I hope he can at least go through qualifying without having an accident. But those are the results of practice 2. Let's just go through the sector time data just to understand why certain teams yesterday were looking so quick. So let's get into that. And in the first sector, which is half about your, say, straight line speed and half of it is about your aerodynamic grip, Racing Bulls were very impressive yesterday. The quickest in the first sector, just ahead of Ferrari and McLaren, who were obviously all around the track very strong. Aston Martin as well, a bit strong in the first sector. Sauber were very surprising. Mercedes, as you can see, were a couple tenths off McLaren and not really looking very good. I would guess through this part of the lap and the final sector in practice 3 is where Mercedes were a lot better. So if they can maintain that for qualifying, then that is great. But really, Mercedes should not be any more than a tenth of a second slower than McLaren through this part of the lap. And I would say the same for the final sector as well. And then you can see Williams. Obviously, they appear to be quite a bit stronger so far today. Alpine were struggling yesterday, mainly because of a setup. I wouldn't say issue. I think they just chose to go that way with the setup with quite a bit less wing. But yeah, that's why they were quite slow in the first and third sector. Red Bull, as you can see, were very slow in the first sector. And clearly, today's improvement is quite a bit down to, especially, I think, the first sector and what they're doing through there. Because there's no reason for them to be 4 tenths of a second slower than their main rivals through just the first sector. The middle sector is really all about straight line speed, and Alpine were the quickest through the middle sector. Again, because I'm pretty sure they were running with a bit lower downforce than other teams. And then Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren come after that. Aston Martin, pretty decent through the middle sector. Mercedes probably could be half a tenth or so better, given that McLaren, same power unit, are where they are on pace through the middle sector. Racing Bulls, not doing too bad. Williams, okay. And then Sauber and Haas, the 2 slowest teams. And then the final sector that really is the best sector at this track at showcasing grip-wise who has the most grip. McLaren and Ferrari, incredibly evenly matched. At least they were in practice too. Tsunoda then coming in third, racing Bulls through the corners yesterday, very strong, and still appeared to be so today to a degree. And as you can see, Red Bull giving away 0.3 of a second pretty much to McLaren and Ferrari. I will have a look at the sector time data for practice 3 in a moment just to see with Red Bull and Mercedes how much better they are compared to what they were doing in the first and third sector yesterday. But yeah, Sauber were very, very strong, which is a surprise. Williams were okay. Mercedes, again, like the first sector, they should only be really a tenth off McLaren, not 3.5 tenths. So there was always, in terms of time that on track that Mercedes could find, there was always probably about 3, maybe 4 tenths of a second that Mercedes could find. And they appeared to have found a lot more than that, which is good to see. Aston Martin were alarmingly slow in the final sector. Alpine, obviously, we know why, because of the setup, or most probable setup differences. And then Haas, yeah, I don't really understand why they're just so bad, but they are. And clearly look like the slowest team here in Melbourne. But let me just quickly, on my end, get up the sector time data for practice 3 if I can. No guarantee that I can, but let me just have a look. And yes, I can get it up, and I'll just read it out to you. So yeah, in the first sector, this time around, Mercedes had the best car compared to everybody. They were doing a 26.2 in the first sector, when in the first sector yesterday they were doing a 26.7. So that's a half a second improvement compared to yesterday. And Red Bull doing a 26.3 in the first sector in practice 3, when they were doing a 26.8 in the first sector yesterday. So both Mercedes and Red Bull improving by half a second in just the first sector alone. And then, if I go to the final sector, the quickest final sector time was a 32.5 yesterday. Today, so far, it's still McLaren, the quickest in the final sector by actually nearly a couple tenths of a second. Lando doing a 32.2. Mercedes, though, the second best team in the final sector in practice 3, doing a 32.4, which is about, half a second again quicker than they were yesterday in the final sector. And then for Red Bull, they did a 32.4 in the final sector in practice 3, when yesterday in the final sector they were doing a 32.8. So basically, if I just go back to these results, basically Mercedes and Red Bull compared to yesterday have improved by half a second. Not half a second, by a second compared to what they were doing yesterday. But also, McLaren are showing quite a bit more pace than they were yesterday as well, especially with the final sector. So McLaren, I still think, have got the fastest car coming into qualifying. But are Ferrari the second best team? Maybe not. It might be Red Bull or it might be Mercedes. We will have to find out in qualifying. But I'm still confident McLaren just about have got the best car here. In terms of who comes after that, again, because of Mercedes and Red Bull's clear improvements in practice 3, it's hard to say now who is the second best team. But I would say the pecking order going into qualifying is McLaren first, and then Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes in second, third, fourth. Not in that order, but they're occupying, those spaces. We'll have to see in qualifying just really who does have the pace. And then after that, yesterday I said Racing Bulls had clearly the best, or not clearly, but I thought they were the best midfield team coming into qualifying today. But they did yesterday, what, a 16.7, and then they improved that to a 116.4 in practice 3, but Williams did a 116.2. So who has the best midfield car? It looks like it's between probably now Racing Bulls and Williams. And then after that, you're looking at what? Aston Martin. And then what? Aston Martin, and then maybe Alpine, and then Sauber, and then Haas. Again, because of certain improvements from certain teams from, so far today compared to yesterday, it's really mixing things up for this qualifying session to the point where we are pretty unsure now as to what really could happen. I am going to stick with my prediction for qualifying that I made yesterday. I'm not going to change it, but I think I'm pretty likely to be wrong with the prediction I have made. Maybe not with pole position, but definitely from, say, second on, through the field. Another thing, by the way, when it comes to who has the best car this weekend, or at least in quali trim, I have asked Nib, who is at the Grand Prix this weekend, and he's currently there. I think he's located at the corner where Oliver Behrman crashed today. What do you call it? And I did ask him who has the best looking car in terms of grip, and he said easily the McLaren. So if it comes down to grip, then McLaren should win that battle. But maybe it will come down to a driver performance rather than necessarily them having the grippiest car of them all. So, yeah, we'll see. Again, I still think McLaren are the favourites just about, but it is incredibly close. You cannot deny that. And that is exactly why we are so excited. But let me get into my final prediction for qualifying, which again, I am sticking with from last night. And I'm going for a McLaren front row, Lando Norris on pole, just ahead of Oscar Piastri in second. Charles Leclerc, I think, will be third, with Max Verstappen in fourth. I always thought Verstappen was going to be in there to a degree. So the improvement he has made, or Red Bull have made, is not a surprise, really. It would still be a surprise if they were actually fighting and getting pole, but if they're within, say, 2 to 3 tenths of a second of pole at worst, that would not be a surprise, because I've not once believed that Red Bull are miles off the pace, because they're not. Then in fifth place, I'm going Lewis Hamilton, with Tsunoda in sixth, George Russell seventh, Isaac Hadjar eighth, Kimi Antonelli ninth, Fernando Alonso then in P10. If Mercedes, though, are quite a bit stronger in qualifying than they were in practice 2 yesterday, which would continue on from the form they've just shown in practice 3, I still don't think they'll get pole, but I think they could end up, say, one of their cars on the second row of the grid, and then maybe Antonelli fifth, something like that, or sixth. So both cars in the top 6 is definitely a possibility for Mercedes if they continue that improvement that they showed in practice 3. But again, we'll have to find out in qualifying, and that is the beauty of, I guess, just how close it already is in 2025. But guys, that's my prediction for qualifying. Let me know your prediction in the live chat. Let me just get the timer back on screen, as we have got just over, there you go, an hour and 5 minutes to go until qualifying begins in Melbourne. So what we're going to do for the next, say, half an hour or so is I'm going to go through your comments and just hear what you guys have to say coming into this session. So make sure to give me your predictions in the chat. Obviously, the poll is still running in the chat as well. So if you want to vote on who exactly out of those four you think will get pole, if you think one of them will get pole, then let me know in that poll, which again will keep running until the beginning of Q3 in about a couple hours from now. But yeah, just let me know your thoughts going into qualifying. And like I said, for the next half hour or so, we'll go through your comments, and then I'll probably go through the teams again and just give my, I guess, overall final thoughts with each team going into qualifying as to where they should probably be based on what they've shown us so far. But yeah, let me just have a quick drink, and then we'll get into your comments. As the Formula 2 sprint race, by the way, is entering the final couple laps. Joshua Dirksen is going to win by the looks of it. I have to say, I mean, the field last year for F2 was a lot stronger, but this year it is quite weak. I'm not saying that all the drivers are terrible, but the talent level on the F2 grid has dropped off quite a bit. The best driver, probably talent-wise, on the grid is it Lindblad? I think in the ART, who is a Red Bull Academy driver that Red Bull do have high-ish hopes for. And then you've also got Victor Martins, who has a lot of talent, but zero consistency, who, by the way, Martins crashed out of the race after a couple laps. So, yeah. It's a shame with Martins, because I reckon, I mean, you've got Jack Doohan in the Alpine now, who, of course, has been an Alpine Academy driver for, a couple years or whatever. But I think Martins has probably got more potential than Doohan, but Martins doesn't have the consistency. When, if you look at Doohan and what he did at F2, he wasn't always consistent, every single race, but he would have Doohan those long stretches of, a few races where he would be regularly winning or on the podium, which is why he had pretty strong finishes in F2 in the seasons that he did, the last couple seasons that he did. And I remember I think it was it the 2023 campaign. If he had just started the season a bit stronger, he probably could have won the championship. But yeah. Anyway, let's come on to some of your comments. And good to see a decent amount of you here. By the way, make sure to smash the like button as well. Obviously, it does help the channel grow and helps show me that you guys obviously enjoy the content. Miss Marquis says, welcome back, Chazza. Thank you very much. And hello to you. I haven't seen you in probably since the final Grand Prix or so. And yeah, it's just great to be back. It feels like it's been a long time. I know it's only been 3 months, which is not really that long of a time, but it feels a lot longer than that. And I think really, for me personally, the reason that is because I've been very busy with uni work ever since pretty much like I came back from the Christmas New Year break. I've just been really full on, except for the final couple weeks of January, where unfortunately I was really ill. I don't know factually whether I had COVID or not, but I'm pretty sure it was COVID. It was really bad. I was bed stricken literally for 2 weeks straight. Couldn't stop coughing. Every time I spoke, it induced a coughing fit. Threw up a few times, mainly because of the amount I was coughing. That was what was causing me to throw up, rather than like eating something and then throwing up. Yeah, it was just crazy. And the most annoying thing is that the illness, the first day of that illness was my birthday. So I never got a chance to actually do anything for my birthday because that's when I got struck down with the illness. And then, like I said, 2 weeks in bed. But since I come back from that, I've just been absolutely full on with obviously content for the channel, which I hope you guys have enjoyed some of the content I've done in the last few weeks. As well, apologies that I remember I uploaded that Lando Norris video in early January, and then there was a bit of a long gap after that where I didn't upload anything, I think, for like 5 weeks. That was mainly because of the 2 week illness I had, because the plan was to upload another video in January, like towards the end of the month, but then, like I said, I got struck down with illness, so yeah. Um, so again, apologies about that, but yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed the last few weeks of content in terms of what I did for testing, a few videos here and there. And yeah, we just worked really hard to get all that content out for you guys. And then yeah, alongside that, I've been working really hard at my uni stuff, and I've got a pretty big week coming up next week. Next Thursday, my dissertation is finally due. Something I've been working on pretty much since the start of November. So, cannot wait to finally get it done. And if I get a good score, which for me would be a first, which is a 70 or above in terms of a number, then that would be absolutely ideal in terms of me getting a good qualification and degree out of this course, and then moving on to the next level. Because if you don't know, I'm doing a BA honors degree in applied media. It's called, and if I get a good enough grade, then the plan is to do a master's for a couple years online. So yeah, hopefully I'm able to do that, but we'll see what happens going forward for the rest of the year. But yeah, I've been really busy with that. But yeah, this is, coming back to this is a welcome break from that. And it's just a welcome back, obviously, to doing this. Something that I enjoy quite a lot. And I'll be honest, it is one of the most enjoyable things that I get to do in my life. Doing these streams, covering the races, doing the watch-alongs, and, enjoying the moments along with you guys. So yeah, really happy to be back, even though it is 4 o'clock in the morning here in the UK. So be it. I don't care what time the race is or qualifying starts. We will be here. Not every single session, of course, but most of the time we will be here. And what do you call it? And yeah, that's actually another thing. Quickly, I want to announce is obviously I'm doing a qualifying and race watch along this weekend. And by the way, the race watch along tomorrow, I will be going live at 2 a.m. UK time. 2 hours, that is, before the race starts. And then obviously the race starts at 4 a.m. here in the UK. And then, obviously we'll watch along the race and then probably do a slight reaction afterwards. But yeah, what I wanted to say was, that race watch along coming up tomorrow, but there will not be a qualifying watch along next week for the Chinese Grand Prix, nor will there be for the race after that in Japan. Purely because these early morning races are a pain, especially for me in terms of, keeping up with my uni work. Plus, it does mess around with my sleeping pattern. Obviously, I'm willing to, to hurt that a bit for this weekend because it's the first Grand Prix, and I'm always going to do a quali and race watch along for the first Grand Prix of the season. That is a given. But yeah, because the next couple of races are early morning races, I am only going to do a race watch along for next week in China, and then, like I said, for the Japanese Grand Prix, which comes a couple weeks after that on the first weekend of April. So just letting you know that. But after the Japanese Grand Prix, I will be doing both a quali and race watch along for Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, which is the two races after that in that first triple header of Japan, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. So yeah, as I said, there will be the odd qualifying and even the odd race watch along that I don't do, but most of the time I will be here streaming. So yeah, don't worry about that. Anyway, the Woda says you know we are hardcore to be up this time to watch quali. Absolutely. I mean, even if the field wasn't looking as exciting, anywhere near as exciting as it is, I think, still being up at this time every year just shows the dedication that we all have to this wonderful sport. Todd asking, is Max toying with us? Maybe. It would be hilarious if Max just gets pole easily. After what he's been saying, that the Red Bull car is not quick enough to fight for pole and all of that stuff. It would be hilarious if he just easily got pole by like 2 or 3 tenths of a second. But even as great as he is, I would be amazed if he got pole. Genuinely amazed if he got pole. Because, yeah, the Red Bull, it's not a bad car, but it's not the best car. And I'm not saying Max needs the best car to get pole, but I just don't think it's quite good enough at this point to put him on pole position. Woden said Behrman looking calamitous. And Rook's even saying Behrman needs to keep his head down and have a few quiet races to build upon because at present doesn't look good. Yeah, I know it's only the first race weekend, but he's had so many problems caused by himself. One big crash and then another smaller one, but still big enough in practice 3 that I think, at least for the rest of the weekend, even if he's, nowhere near the points, he just needs to make sure he comes home, finishes the race without any, damage or further damage to the car. And then, like you guys are saying, try and have some quiet races after this. The only thing I will say for Behrman is he has he has raced here in Formula 2, but in Formula 1, obviously, doesn't have the level of experience that his teammate does around this circuit. So I think Ocon was always going to be a bit stronger this weekend than Behrman, purely because of that. But I am surprised just how poor Behrman has been. Woden saying he was terrible in Brazil in the rain as well. I think with that though, I think that was purely because of just the way he decided to drive that race. I think he was just trying way too hard. Which I know that might sound silly to say, trying too hard. Obviously everyone tries as hard as they can, but he really could have been a lot calmer in his approach to that race. Because there would have been points on offer for Behrman if he had not had the amount of spins he did. But yeah, I just think he maybe he was just a bit too aggressive in his approach to that that Grand Prix. And maybe the reason he was too aggressive was because he thought there was a possibility of a good result. The Human Pokedex, cool name by the way, says Ferrari ain't inspiring me right now. Well, if it's a plus to say this, they look better this weekend so far than I thought they would be. Not massively better, but I didn't have the greatest hopes after testing because I just thought Ferrari, were lacking in certain areas, but they look like they're right on pace with McLaren. When I say right on pace, I'm not saying as quick, but they're in the, they're right in that fight, which again, I didn't quite think they would be here in Melbourne. I thought they would maybe lag behind a bit. Woden says, how many safety cars will be in the race? I'm predicting 3, probably at least, given that it still is forecast to be a wet race. So, yeah, you would imagine 3. We may even get a couple red flags. Todd says, remember Haas didn't switch to the Ferrari front suspension. Maybe that's why they're struggling so far. Because I think they do still take on certain Ferrari parts. I know they've got a new technical partnership with Toyota, but I don't think their whole thing with Ferrari is completely done, unless someone wants to prove me wrong, and feel free to prove me wrong. Woden says the Aston has looked terrible so far. I mean, yesterday they were in the top 10 with Lance Stroll, and they did a 117.2, when in practice 3, let me just have a look what lap time they did in practice 3. In practice 3, they did a 116.9. So an improvement, but not by as much as others. So I think they can find a bit more pace. The Aston Martin are not going to have a great season because they're focusing really on 2026. Plus, they still can't really develop for shit. So, yeah. Don't really have, too high expectations for them. Todd says, what does it do to the big 3 if Max wins by a healthy lead? Not quite sure what you mean by the big 3, if you're talking about the teams. But if Max was to win tomorrow's race, comfortably, then I don't think it would mean that, Max is going to dominate the season. Because if Max ends up winning comfortably, that could be because Max is just so much superior in wet conditions. I mean, look in Brazil last year. Were Red Bull the quickest team in Brazil? No. But in the wet, with Max in that car, they were. And they ended up winning comfortably. So, yeah. I think if Max was to win tomorrow in wet conditions and he started the race, from say 4th or 5th on the grid, which is around where I think he will start from, then that would just assert that, or reassert what we already know, that Max Verstappen is the best driver in the world. And I know people like to argue with that but you can't compare it to other series. Formula One, in my view, when it comes to, open wheel racing and pretty much all racing except, say, rally cars, I think, is comparable enough to where you could say Max is the best driver in the world. And Formula One definitely has the highest quality drivers on in the world, at least at the top end. Again, excluding rallying or NASCAR. But if you include all the other series, WEC, IndyCar, Formula E, all of that other stuff, Max Verstappen is the best of them all. Absolutely. So, yeah. Miss Marquis says, Fernando, no, I don't think so. The Williams may be in the top 10. Uh, well, this is the funny thing, coming out of testing, I thought Williams had the best midfield car. I expected them to have at least one car comfortably in the top 10 this weekend. But then yesterday, they're both cars just outside of the top 10. And I was thinking, oh, maybe Williams, maybe this track just doesn't quite suit them. But then they were comfortably in the top 10 in practice 3, a second a lap quicker than they were compared to practice 2 on lap time. So I would say chances are they will be in the top 10. Whether it's with both cars, I'm not sure. Todd says Hadjar on the top 10, that would be something. It would. It would be more so because of the car being, really quite good this weekend for some reason. But yeah, it would be a great debut for someone who has received zero hype going into the season, and rightfully so. No disrespect to Hadjar. I know he had a good F2 season last year, but he's not in. If you look at some of the drivers that have come onto the grid who have come from Formula 2, Kimi Antonelli, Oliver Behrman, Jack Doohan, drivers like that. Hadjar, I don't think, is on the same level in terms of talent. But the reason he got the job is because he impressed Red Bull so much in the testing he did with them and also for the AlphaTauri / Racing Bulls team. And that's why he ended up getting the seat. Obviously, once Perez was dropped from Red Bull for Lawson, who obviously was with Racing Bulls. Woden says he thinks it will be Max, Russell, Norris for the top 3. Sarah Gara, good to see you. Says hopefully Fernando Alonso can get to 500 races. Rook saying very interested to see what Williams do this season. Fully matured after losing Claire and rebuilding. Well, the last time, and I predicted them in my season predictions to finish 5th in the championship, which I am sticking with. I do believe in what they've got car-wise and driver lineup-wise. I think you could probably say they've got the strongest driver lineup in the midfield. It would be kind of coming full circle for Williams in terms of, under Claire Williams, they were doing well, or not well-ish until 2018. 2017 was the last season where Williams were actually good, where they finished 5th in the championship, had a podium that season with Stroll. We're regularly in the points, but finished 5th in the championship. Top 5 of the championship really is where Williams should be aiming, I think. I know you've got other teams on the grid like Aston Martin who've got tons of money, but Williams, there is a history there, and that history should not be forgotten. By the way, I've seen a replay of Behrman's accident at turn 11, and what a silly accident. Touching the grass on the entry as he tried to give himself as wide a turn in and then spun. That is a very poor error. But yeah, since that 5th place finish, they then became very quickly the worst team on the grid. And they were, I wouldn't say they were close to going out of business, but they were not a million miles away, put it that way. And it was for the best that Claire Williams and the Williams family stepped away from the team in 2020, and so that the new owners could take ownership and run things their way. And you got to say that the new owners have done a decent job in terms of the hires maybe they've made. And then, Williams, since those new owners have come in, have just progressively got stronger. They were still kind of at the back. Then they, 2023, they finished in 7th, I think it was, which was their first proper decent year in a few years. Last year dropped back to ninth in the championship, but this year, yeah, it looks to be like a proper big step forward for them. And maybe we'll see Williams on the podium again this year. We'll have to see. But it's looking good if you're a Williams fan going forward, especially into the next era of Formula One, because if Mercedes and their power units are indeed the power units to have from 2026 on, obviously Williams have got an engine deal with Mercedes that will benefit them quite a lot and may see them as one of the top 3-4 teams on the grid, which realistically, at best, is what you maybe, that's the best you could expect from Williams, given just how things have evolved financially since Williams were, winning championships 30 years ago. Miss Marquis says Oscar, Lando, Max. I think that's a bit more realistic than the Woden's prediction, but who knows? Honestly, who knows? We'll see who is correct. Mickey says, do you want a wet or dry race? Preferably, I would like a wet race, as long as it's not wet to the point where we have loads of red flags and we're waiting around forever. But to be honest, I don't think it really matters that much in terms of what the weather is. And I'd say that really goes for the season as a whole. It's that close and competitive. I don't think we need wet races. If we get wet races this year, I think it will just be a bonus rather than the only thing that we, can have to make a good race, which, there were times, a couple years ago like that where we would pray for rain because it was the only possibility of having a good race. I don't think that's the case anymore. But yeah, it does. If I go back and look at the weather for tomorrow, it's still pretty likely. 80% chance of rain for tomorrow. So, yeah. And the rain, by the way, it doesn't look like it's going to be heavy rain. It looks like it's probably going to be. Well, we might get some heavy rain, but I don't think it's going to be maybe as bad as what we saw in Brazil a few months ago. Drew Black Music says, this is brilliant. 11 p.m. in Mississippi and F1 is qualifying. Yeah, it is. That's one thing I did actually think coming into, what do you call it? Coming into this stream is that for you guys on, or in North America, or just the Americas in general, this is on at a great time. Late Friday night qualifying in Melbourne, and then of course tomorrow. Same for the race, late Saturday night. So yeah, I hope if we do have a load of North Americans or South Americans, hope you're all doing well, and hope you're all excited for the session ahead. By the way, Rooks, I will post the link of the stream out again in a moment. Thanks for reminding. Todd saying, I want to see controlled aggression from Yuki this season. I think we have seen that, to be honest, for the last couple years. He's not the driver he was in 2021 or 2022. He has evolved quite a bit. So I don't think that's really going to... what do you call it? I don't think that's really going to change massively. Drew Black Music saying, thanks for the puke play-by-play. I'm pretty sure that's an insult, but yeah, cheers for that. Um, I'm not even sure why I said cheers for that, but I'm not sure why he said that. um, Mickey, do you think Behrman will bin it in the race? If he's binning it in practice in the dry, then yeah, probably. Todd says Shazza and RPM doing a live watch along pipe dream. I don't think that was it. I'm assuming you're talking about, is it rocket powered Mohawk, that guy who some of the content I've seen of his I do like. I will admit I don't really watch a lot of other F1 content creators because I just don't have the time, to be honest. I mean, mainly when I use YouTube, I listen just to music normally. Um, but yeah, I normally he doesn't do watch alongs, but yeah, good to see that he's venturing out. And cheers, Woden, for that, saying, mate, I prefer listening to you over the Sky Shite commentary. Mickey, what's everyone's guess for who will have the fastest car in the wet? My bet is the Red Bull. Yeah, probably Red Bull or McLaren, I would say. Nicholas asks, do you think Kimi and Lawson can get their first win this year? Lawson, I'm going to say no pretty easily with that. I just don't think Lawson's good enough in a car that isn't as fast as it needs to be. I think really for Lawson to really be in a position where he can win races. Um, Antonelli, yes, I think he will win a race, at least one, but maybe more. We will find out. But let me see. Right, I will go on to a few more comments. Make sure to keep them coming, and make sure to keep the likes coming as well. I'm just going to quickly post the link of the stream out one final time, and then we'll get on to some more of your comments. So just give me a second, guys. Come join us here to watch along the first qualifying session of 2025 in Melbourne. And hopefully we'll get a few more joining. I think especially here in Europe, as the time rolls on, we might get some more people joining us. Because I think a lot of people will just wake up right as qualifying starts. So yeah, I'll read out a load more comments and then we'll get on to the teams again, and I'll just go through quickly my expectations for the teams, and I'll probably go through my predictions again. Um, Mickey says, I think the midfield will be carnage this year with all the new rookies. But let's hope so. Um, no way Max can be successful in rally. Rally's another beast. Yeah, that's why I'm never going to compare, F1 drivers to rally drivers. But in the other, comparable stuff, again, IndyCar, WEC, Formula E, Formula One, Max is the best of them all, absolutely, and I don't think anyone could debate that. If you put Max in in a say in IndyCar, if you put him in a team that can win the championship, doesn't necessarily have to be the best team, but if you put him in a team that can win the championship, I think Max would dominate in America. Same with WEC. If you put him in a team that can win that championship, he would win. Same with Formula E. Obviously, if you put him in a team that couldn't win the championship, then I don't think Max is at that level where he can just easily, uh, you know, outdo the car to that point. But yeah, He is the best, no doubt. Drew Black Music says, any Newey sightings yet? No, he I don't think you'll see him at a Grand Prix really this season. Probably the only Grand Prix you'll see him at is the British Grand Prix, because obviously Aston Martin's uh team base is literally across the road from the track. So probably that race, because Aston Martin, credit to them, they've really committed into helping Adrian and to making sure he is as comfortable as possible, because news came out a couple of weeks ago, because obviously Adrian officially started, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, news came out that they've actually built him like a little apartment at the factory so that he can work through the night as well and just work when he wants. He's not going to be there all the time. Obviously, he'll be at home when he wants to, but when he decides to come in and maybe wants to come in at night, then they've set up a little, I guess, little apartment there so that he can, sleep at the factory. Which again, credit to the team for, you know, for accommodating Adrian, because he will be, if they do win championships in the future, he will be a big reason for that. Todd says, "Will Albon be exposed by Sainz? I'm sure Sainz has extra or had extra motivation, but we'll see with the final race standings." Well, so far they've been very close. They literally set the exact same lap time yesterday, and then today in practice 3, Albon was only slightly behind. If it's that close, then even if Sainz beats him over the course of the season, if they're that close on lap time, then I don't think you could say Albon would be embarrassed or exposed in any way. Carlos theoretically should beat Albon. Carlos is more talented and is one of easily the top 10 best drivers on the grid. Albon is more debatable as to whether he's one of the top 10 best drivers on the grid. So, if Albon gets beat by Sainz, but he's, that close on lap time and only just loses the head to head, to Carlos, absolutely zero shame in that. But yeah, we'll see how it goes over the season. I think Sainz will beat Albon. Not, I don't think he's going to absolutely destroy him, but I think Sainz will prove to be most of the time the number one for Williams. Oh, Drew was saying I was joking about your medical dissertation. No harm meant, no problem. Um, Ferrari has one great wet weather driver, says Serigara. I would not agree with that. I think I know Leclerc's not had too many great wet weather performances, but I do think he is still very, very good in the wet. I think the car he's been driving a lot of the time has not helped, if I'm being honest. Um, Mickey says, has Aston got their new wind tunnel up and running now? Let me Google it, but they should do. Let me have a look. Oh, thankfully, an article from one day ago on the Formula One website saying Aston Martin begin use of state-of-the-art new wind tunnel as part of big focus on 2026 cars. So there you go. They have officially begun using it. And I mean, Adrian started, a couple of weeks ago. So there you go. Drew saying, Newey started March 2nd. All of the pundits swear he'll be fully submerged in 2026 design. I see the best trackside engineer in the business. And two-time former world champion ain't waiting. I mean, I think me and Nib discussed that in pre-season testing that maybe Adrian might contribute some work towards the current car just to give the team a bit of a morale boost. But I think that depends purely on just how good maybe the wind tunnel numbers look on the 2026 car as they're working on it through the season. Because if the numbers on it look really, really strong and encouraging, then may as well just continue working on that rather than trying to, work on the current car. Which is why I don't think Aston Martin are really going to bother too much with the current car in terms of development. And that's why I think Aston Martin will finish 8th in the championship, because I just don't see them, especially in the second half of the season, really being a factor a lot of the time. Woden says Leclerc does need to prove himself with a big wet weather drive at some stage, though. Absolutely. Especially when you look at what Max has done, in certain wet weather races. I agree. He does need to prove that he is capable of similar, you know, levels of performance. But we just have to see, when we'll if we get, well, we are going to get a wet race tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow is that opportunity for Leclerc to show that even in the wet, he can, beat the best. And if he can do that, then that would absolutely prove that he is capable of, being the world champion. And, Charles Leclerc absolutely is a possible world champion. I have no doubt about that. But the only thing missing really from his game compared to Max is consistency, I think. I think when both Leclerc and Max are at their best, I think Leclerc easily can match Max and has the ability to beat Max. But Leclerc, that's the only criticism, is not every weekend is he at his absolute peak. We saw that last year where there were certain races where Carlos Sainz was better than Leclerc. And for Leclerc, that can't really happen if you are going to win a championship. So, yeah. Um, Mickey saying Aston has given Newey 2 years worth of wind tunnel time for the 2026 car is my point. Yeah, I mean, Aston, there's no real point working on this year's car again, unless unless they feel like the team needs some sort of morale boost going forward for the rest of the year. They just need to focus on next year's car, because if they could sacrifice this year to be championship contenders maybe next year or the years after, then we're all going to look back at 2025 as a crucial year where they sacrificed a lot to be competitive. Woden saying early 2022 Max and Charles battles were epic. They were, and again, if it wasn't for his own team, Leclerc, I'm not saying he would have won the championship. I think Max overall in the end was going to win the championship, because even if Ferrari didn't make one single mistake, I still think the Red Bull car was, when it mattered, just a bit too good, especially with Max in it. And Leclerc, whilst in qualifying, he was super strong and, a lot of the time did the best he could. I just think as the season went on, Red Bull just kept getting stronger with their pace compared to Ferrari. Um, And what do you call it? Yeah. In the end, I think Leclerc would have ended up losing out, but Ferrari obviously did not give him the best opportunity to actually fight for the championship. I mean, looking back, the amount of race wins he probably should have had. Maybe Saudi Arabia, where it was really close to him and Max, but I mean, there was nothing really at fault for that. You had Monaco, obviously. Still don't know how they threw that race away. Spain, they were leading easily and they were going to win, and then the engine failed. Baku possibly could have won. Silverstone, they would have won with Leclerc, ended up winning with Sainz. Hungary, they should have won, but they completely threw it away. So, Leclerc, that season, Leclerc had, what was it? Was it 3 race wins that year? I think Leclerc had. He should have had total for the year another probably 3 or 4 wins. But Ferrari, that's what happened. Anyway, here's for your comments, guys. Make sure to keep them coming. I will read a few more out before we get to the start qualifying, which thankfully is only under 20 minutes away as we rush on through this build-up. But let me go through the teams quickly and just give my thoughts as to where they should all be for qualifying this morning. Here in the UK for us, at least this morning, or this late afternoon in Melbourne. So starting with McLaren, they are just about, I think, the favourites for qualifying. They've got, through the corners, the best car. Not by a massive margin, but by enough to where they are looking as competitive as they are. And at high speed, don't seem to be giving away a ton of lap time. A lot more efficient they are in a straight line than they used to be, McLaren, which is a benefit for them. So yeah, McLaren, they are the favourites. Not to the point, again, whether they should be easily getting the front row or easily getting pole. It is going to be a very close fought thing between, the two McLarens and Leclerc and Max and maybe Russell and Antonelli as well. Or maybe even Lewis Hamilton. But as long as both drivers deliver the best laps they can, then at least McLaren should be on pole and maybe even taking the front row. Both drivers have been very good this weekend. Oscar, the home favourite, of course, has been quicker than Lando in practice 2 and practice 3. And if Oscar Piastri, who has not really been talked about a lot as a championship contender, building up to the season. And personally, I don't think he will quite be a championship contender. If he wants to be, this is the weekend he needs to put down a marker. If he can get pole and then possibly win the race or at least beat his teammate, that will put down a good marker for the season ahead. And given that it is his home Grand Prix, he's got all the support he needs. He just has to deliver. So yeah, we will see which McLaren driver ends up ahead of the other. But again, as long as both drivers deliver their best possible laps, pole should be got by McLaren and maybe even the front row. Red Bull have improved quite a bit compared to yesterday. Max Verstappen should be right in the top 3/4 on the grid. But I still think Red Bull are lacking that extra couple tenths of a second that you need, I think, or that Red Bull need to see Max Verstappen possibly getting on pole position. Max, of course, has got pole here at Melbourne in the last couple years, so we know he can get the job done, but I'm not sure Red Bull have got enough of a car to get the job done. So Max, we know he will do the best lap he can, and he will be right in there. But Red Bull, I just don't quite think have got enough of a car. But they will be right in there, mixing it with McLaren and Ferrari to an extent. And talking of Ferrari, lots of hype going into the season. And after yesterday's pace, lots of hype probably going into this session. But do they have legit a quick enough car for pole? I think they do, but I think really if they're going to get it, it's going to be slightly reliant on what Norris and Piastri do with their laps in terms of whether those drivers deliver the best possible laps they can. If they don't, of course, that will help Ferrari. But with Leclerc, he really needs to tap into the form he showed here 3 years ago, where he absolutely dominated the weekend. Because the last couple years here in Melbourne, he's not done very well. Last year and the year before, I believe, out-qualified by Carlos Sainz, and obviously last year, out-raced by Sainz as well in a Ferrari 1-2 in the Grand Prix on that occasion. So, Leclerc desperately, again, needs to tap back into that form from 3 years ago. If he does, maybe that is what makes the difference today with Leclerc getting pole. But if he can't, then Ferrari most likely should be on the second row. I'd be very surprised if they're not on the first 2 rows of the grid. Their car definitely quick enough for pole, but again, it's going to come down really to the drivers as to who actually ends up getting it. For Lewis Hamilton, as long as he's probably at worst a couple tenths of a second off the pace of Leclerc, then I think that's okay enough for the first Grand Prix of his Ferrari career. And then maybe, if Leclerc is on pole and Hamilton's only a couple tenths off of Leclerc, at worst, Hamilton maybe could end up third or fourth on the grid, which would not be the worst starting position for what could be a possibly wet race where we know Lewis Hamilton could excel. For Mercedes-Benz, a lot better looking than yesterday, and we're right in there with Russell and Antonelli. If they are legitimately much improved compared to yesterday, I think they'll be in there, but I don't think they'll be fighting for pole. I still don't think they've quite got enough of a car to be on pole position. I just don't think they have what McLaren have, and that's what really separates McLaren and Mercedes is McLaren have still the superior aerodynamic grip. And that is why Mercedes, I don't think, get pole position. Third, fourth on the grid, I think at best is realistically where they will end up, which is still, if they do get that, that's still a good result for them, considering where they were a year ago, and that would put them right in the mix for a possible race win on Sunday. So yeah, Mercedes, they're in there, absolutely. They've improved a lot, but I would not be expecting pole position from this team. Now for the midfield, Aston Martin, I think will be fighting for Q3. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were in practice 3, but yeah, they're not looking as strong right now as they did coming out of Friday practice compared to, say, Williams. Williams looking a lot better. Aston Martin not really improving very much. Alonso has actually struggled this weekend compared to teammate Lance Stroll, which is a surprise. I would be surprised if that continues in this session coming up in just over 10 minutes' time. But maybe Stroll will out-qualify Alonso. We will have to find out. But Aston Martin, again, I think the top 10 is possible, but not as likely as it was yesterday. Alpine looking a tad better with a better setup, but still not top 10 material, which I think really is down to the track layout. It's just a bit too high speed in terms of too many straights, I think, for Alpine to really be competitive in the midfield. Obviously, remember they still have the Renault power unit, which is still quite weak. So, should be probably getting both cars into Q2, but I would be shocked if they got a car into Q3. For Haas, they're clearly the slowest team. Hopefully Oliver Behrman can stop crashing. Racing Bulls looked incredibly quick yesterday. Can they keep that up today? Probably not exactly the same pace from yesterday, but I think definitely they will have at minimum one car in Q3. But I'm going to stick with my prediction. I think they get both cars into the top 10, which would be an incredible start for a team that did not look very good in testing. Williams didn't look great yesterday, but after practice 3, looked like they could be the quickest midfield team, which is what I thought they would be coming into this weekend anyway. So looking very good for Williams. Both drivers very closely matched and quick. And if they can keep that up, Williams, if maybe certain front-running drivers are not quite at it today, you don't know, Williams might be able to get, say, a third row or maybe even lock out the fourth row of the grid. It's definitely a possibility. And then Sauber, I thought would be easily the slowest team here, but Hulkenberg was in the top 10 yesterday. Bortoletto was only just outside of the top 10 in practice 3. Watch out for Sauber. Might cause a bit of a surprise today. We'll see how they do, but I'm not expecting them in the top 10, but they have been a bit surprising with their performance so far this weekend. And a reminder, guys. Oh, no, not that screen. Let's go to this one. This is my qualifying prediction. I think it will be a McLaren front row, and I'm going Lando Norris on pole, Oscar Piastri in second, Leclerc third, Verstappen fourth, Hamilton fifth, and then Tsunoda, Russell, Hadjar, Antonelli, and Alonso rounding out the field. This prediction, by the way, was made after practice 2. That's why I've got Mercedes so low down. If Mercedes were as quick yesterday as they've proven to be in practice 3, I probably would have had them right up there with Ferrari and Red Bull. But yeah, that's the way it goes. But guys, we have got about 8 minutes to go until, actually, I'll sync up the timer in a moment at the 7-minute to go mark. But yeah, we've got just over 7 minutes remaining until we get to find out who has the pace in 2025, at least this weekend. Because, of course, it's not going to be the same every Grand Prix. And with once the development kicks in, things will change quite a bit during this season. And I will come to your comments in a few moments' time. Let me just wait for it to tick over to the next minute. There you go. So 7 minutes remaining. Let me just read out a couple more comments, and then I think we will get on to the final few stats that you guys need to know regarding the top teams and drivers going into this session. By the way, smash that like button. We're currently on 23 likes. Let's try and get up to, say, 35, 40 likes if we can in the next half an hour. That'd be great if we could. Hello to Yanni, by the way. Good to see you after the winter break. Todd says, I think Williams has one quick lap. Let's see how they do in a race. Todd also saying, if you look at the top 4 teams, how many of those teams is a clear number 1 driver? Now think about the other 3 teams battling, and they are willing to be the number 1 driver on their team. A spicy season. Indeed. Obviously, Max is the clear number 1 at Red Bull, but like you say, at the other 3 teams, there is a battle to be had. As Yanni's saying, Hamilton is sandbagging. He's been sandbagging since 2023, waiting for the perfect time. Well, maybe he will finally strike back in this session. And as I said in my video a few weeks ago about why Ferrari could win the championship this year, we will see definitely in these first couple races whether Lewis Hamilton is back to not his absolute best, but pretty much his best. Because these first 2 circuits on the calendar, Albert Park and the Shanghai International Circuit, are 2 of some of his best ever circuits. Hamilton, for example, has had many pole positions at this track, to the point where in the last decade, the 2010s, he was dominating qualifying here. And if you actually look at the 2010s, Lewis Hamilton got pole position in every qualifying session in that decade here in Melbourne, except for 2010, 2011, and 2013. Every other year was Lewis Hamilton. And all those other years, 2010, 11, 13, was Sebastian Vettel. So, if he is back to his, again, almost his best, or pretty much his best, he should hopefully show it in this session. As Rook's saying, Max is going to blitz the field with 6/10 of a second, and the ha ha ha, you thought it would be different meme will be unleashed. It's possible. It would be funny if Max ended up, like I said, easily on pole after all of the hype and all of, as well, not just the hype, but all of what Red Bull have been saying and Max has been saying. It would be funny. As Jordan Connor with an interesting prediction saying, I'm thinking Charles is taking pole, but I think Carlos is winning. Watching him in the Williams car is exciting, in my opinion. If Carlos can somehow end up getting like a 5th, 6th, 7th in qualifying, which again would be a big surprise, even though Williams look good. In the wet, I mean, you don't know what could happen. It would be funny, wouldn't it, if Carlos won the Australian Grand Prix 2 years in a row? But surely that won't happen. But anyway, let me hide this timer and go through some final stats regarding the top teams and drivers that you guys need to know going into qualifying. For McLaren, Lando has never started on the front row here in Melbourne. Had some good pace here, but it's never really had the car to be on the front row here in Melbourne. McLaren's last pole position and front row lockout in Melbourne was 2012, 13 years ago, with Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button. That was the first Australian Grand Prix I watched live. That's how long ago that I've been watching. How long, and it feels crazy it was that long ago. McLaren, though, last year qualified 4th and 6th here, but of course a year ago did not quite have the beast of a car that they have now. Red Bull, Max Verstappen has started on pole in Melbourne in the last 2 years, so watch out for him because he's got the ability definitely to take pole. Red Bull, though, not been very successful in qualifying here in Melbourne in the last 10 years. Only 2 poles here, again being Max in the last couple of years. And last year, Red Bull did qualify 1st and 3rd. Perez was 3rd, but then dropped down to 6th because of a grid penalty. Obviously, Red Bull were a lot quicker this time last year than they are now. For Ferrari, their last pole in Melbourne was in 2022 with Charles Leclerc a weekend. They absolutely dominated, and that would be a great way to start the season if they could replicate that. That is, though, their only pole position in Melbourne in the last 10 years. And actually, if you want to go back to the last time before 2022 they had pole here in Melbourne, you'd have to go back to 2007 with Kimi Raikkonen, who, of course, won from pole on his debut for Ferrari. So Ferrari, looking at the last 20 years in qualifying here in Melbourne, have not been very successful at all. So chances are they will end up not on pole if it does play on form this session. Ferrari, this time last year, 2nd and 5th they were in qualifying. Of course, so ended up 1st and 2nd in the race. And for Mercedes, their last pole in Melbourne was 6 years ago with Lewis Hamilton in 2019. Mercedes in the last 10 years have been very successful here, 5 pole positions since 2015. Last year, though, they were 7th and 11th here in 2024. Surely it'll be a lot better today. And let's go on to the Watchalong. As all the cars, by the way, queuing up at the exit of the pit lane. The tyre compounds, by the way, are the C5, C4, and C3 compounds. So the 3 softest compounds in the Pirelli range have been brought to this Grand Prix, which is normal for Pirelli to do that because it is a street circuit. As there you go, green light to the exit of the pit lane. And we are underway properly for 2025. And the first two cars on track are the two Haas's. And I will sync up the timer, guys, in about 40 seconds from now. Hello, Nib, by the way, who is currently at the track and watching from turn 11. So hopefully he enjoys himself and maybe enjoys what could be an Oscar Piastri pole position after, of course, the Australian topped practice 3 with the best time of the weekend so far, a 1:15.9. Pole position, by the way, I think will probably be, let me just sync the timer up quickly. There you go. 17 minutes to go in Q1. Pole position, I think, will be probably a 1:15.3 or a 1:15.4, something like that. I'd be very surprised if anyone gets into the low 1:15s. That would be, quite a surprise. But, a 15.3 or a 15.4 is what I think pole position is for today. The best time in this session, though, is probably going to be a mid to low 1:16, as Oliver Behrman has just come on the radio saying he has a problem with the gearbox. Haas have said it's okay now, and he's saying, oh no, I can't shift. Well, I'm sure his accidents have not helped the gearbox. It is a new gearbox, I believe, after his crash yesterday. But yeah, what an absolute shit show of a weekend for Oliver Behrman. As now we get a few drivers now beginning their first laps, qualifying laps of the year. And Behrman is going to come back in, and hopefully that can be fixed so he can actually do qualifying. As we're looking at Jack Doohan in the Alpine, flying his way through turn 1, 2, and through turn 3. Doohan's had a pretty decent weekend. He was faster than Gasly yesterday by a tenth of a second. And if he can do that today, then even if Alpine are not really anywhere near the top 10, then you can't argue against Doohan's performance. And, of course, Jack Doohan also, it is his home race along with Oscar Piastri, as Oliver Behrman saying, no, it's broken. And the Alpine, by the way, grip-wise, looking pretty good through turn 9 and 10, now into turn 11. And oversteer on the exit as Russell has gone quickest on a set of medium compound tyres, interestingly. So let me just update that. Of course, anyone below the dotted line you can see on my screen. At the end of the session, whoever's in there will be out of the session. As Jack Doohan goes quickest on a 1:16.9, which is a pretty good first run, I have to say, for Doohan. Hulkenberg, though, goes quickest on a 1:16.9. So good first runs there for Hulkenberg and Doohan. As Alonso goes nearly 4 tenths quicker on a 1:16.5. I think we're going to see quite a bit quicker lap times here in Q1 than I think I was initially expecting. So Alonso quickest. From Hulkenberg, Doohan, Russell was in 4th. It's now Liam Lawson, who's had a horrid weekend. He's up in 4th. Russell now 6th because Alex Albon is in 3rd place. Not quite sure why Mercedes are using a set of mediums, because if it's going to be wet tomorrow, there's no point saving tyres. But yeah, it's now Gasly up to 2nd in the Alpine. So Alonso, Gasly, Hulkenberg, Stroll now in 4th position. And then Albon, Doohan, Lawson, Russell, with Antonelli just coming in behind Russell now in ninth. And then you've got Ocon in 10th, with Carlos Sainz in 11th. Not a great start for the Spaniard, who I think may have just had a lap time deleted. I'm not sure. As Leclerc goes quickest on a 1:16.4, which is what he did in practice 2 yesterday. Here comes Lando Norris, who goes quickest by 4.5 tenths onto a 1:16.0. That's a great start for Lando. And really, he shouldn't have to do any more runs. That is a very strong first run. So Norris quickest. Leclerc is in second. Lewis Hamilton now in fourth place. So Ferrari second and fourth. And then you got Gasly fifth. And then Hulkenberg, Stroll, Albon, Doohan, Lawson. As we're looking at Oscar Piastri, who is not, I'm not sure if he's on the quickest lap here. Nope. 10th and a half down on his teammate, but goes easily into second place. Good start for the Maccas. Of course, Constructors champions last year, and McLaren looking this year to win 2 Constructors titles in a row. The last time they did that was in 1990 and 1991, where, of course, they had Ayrton Senna and Gerhard Berger racing for them. As Lando saying a little bit of gravel in turn 6, keep an eye on that side of the car on the floor. So Lando just letting his team know. As Max Verstappen splits the 2 McLarens and goes second, only 0.015 of a second slower than Lando Norris. So Red Bull immediately showing that they have got some good pace. Maybe not the best pace, but still, you know, good enough, let's say. As a replay there of Hamilton, is that? Or Leclerc? No, it was a McLaren. As, by the way, Astro, great to see you, mate. After the winter, great to have you along. As we are now seeing George Russell, who is currently 14th. Both Mercedes are, according to, and yeah, they are still on the medium compound tyres. Again, baffling to me, because it's going to be a wet race tomorrow. I just don't know why they're saving tyres. They're not going to be quicker on a set of C4s. So I just don't get what this is about, really. Bortoletto is up to 8th place. Good first run for him. First qualifying lap for the Formula 2 champion, remember, Gabriel Bortoletto. And the first Brazilian driver we've had on the grid in quite a number of years. As well, George Russell has done a very good middle sector on these medium compound tyres, as Carlos Sainz improves up to 4th place for Williams. As Alex Albon did a purple middle sector on the lap he just did, but ends up in P7. So both Williams is easily in the top 10. Isaac Hadjar has just gone 8th for Racing Bulls. As Russell goes 4th on a set of mediums, only 0.3 of a second off the pace of Norris. That is an incredibly impressive lap time, because tyre corrected, as there is Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the minority owner of Manchester United, of course, as many of you will know. Yeah, only 0.3 off Norris on a harder compound, a compound that should be 4 to 5 tenths slower. That is really, really good pace from Russell. As let me just see these next couple laps over the line, and then I'll correct the order because there are a couple changes in there, such as Yuki Tsunoda getting up there. As Leclerc up to third, only a quarter of a tenth off the pace. Fernando Alonso goes up to fifth. It is incredibly close, by the way, throughout the field. As Lance Stroll comes to the line and goes ninth. So it is Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Piastri, Alonso, Russell, Sainz, Albon, Stroll, Hadjar. That is your top 10. And then it is Doohan, Hamilton, Tsunoda, surprisingly 13th compared to his teammate Hadjar in 10th. And then you got Bortoletto 14th, Gasly 15th, as Lewis Hamilton now goes up to 7th. And in the drop zone, with just under 7 minutes to go, it is Hulkenberg, Lawson, Ocon, Antonelli, and Behrman. As yellow flag. Only briefly, though, it goes green again as here's a McLaren of Piastri finishing a lap and doing the exact same lap time as he did before. So still in fourth place. Antonelli, of course, has only done one run on the mediums at the start of the session, so he is obviously going to improve. As here's a replay of Liam Lawson locking the inside front and just about grazing the barrier with his rear left tyre. He is under big threat of being knocked out here as Antonelli's car sparking away very heavily. I hope there's no damage to that car because I do feel like that car's sparking more than it probably should. But he is going quicker on the soft tyres he's on. But yeah, Lawson has had a horrible weekend, and I do fear that Lawson may get eliminated in Q1. But here comes Kimi Antonelli, who goes only 14th. That is a disappointing run and puts him under serious pressure because some of the drivers behind him will improve. And yeah, Antonelli, half a second slower than Russell, and Russell is on a harder compound than him. So is there damage to that car? He did go slightly wide on the exit of turn, is that 6 or 7? I did think that car was sparking a lot more. And yeah, after he touched the gravel there, was sparking quite a bit. I did think there that the car was sparking a lot more than it really should. So I'm wondering whether Antonelli has got damage to the underneath of his car. And if he does, then he could be in serious trouble today. As Lando Norris, by the way, has gone slightly quicker. Still in P1, a 1:15.912, which is slightly the quickest time of the weekend so far. So very quick running so far in this first part of qualifying. And yeah, Woden saying that Merc is slammed to the deck. I think a bit too much than it normally should be. Almost looks like a car, from the late 80s, early 90s with the way it was sparking and hitting the ground. And yeah, surely that is damage. There's just no way that should be doing it that much. But what can they really do to fix it? Not sure really what they can do. As Antonelli, I think, is about to... Well, he's still on track and there's 3.5 minutes to go. If he comes into the pits now, I think Antonelli will get eliminated in Q1. So he's got to stay out and do another run, really, as Kimi. As Carlos Sainz is on what probably is a final run. He's not improving on this lap, but he is only slightly slower than what he did before. Of course, Carlos, the race winner of last year's Australian Grand Prix. if he can do it this year in a Williams, he'll go down as having one of the legendary drives in the history of this famous Grand Prix. As he exits the final corner, and Carlos Sainz improves up to 7th place. I think Carlos should be fine, as prayers being said in the Williams garage by Carlos Sainz's partner Rebecca Donaldson. And I think those prayers will be just about answered, as Liam Lawson now is on a flying lap. He's improved his first sector. As long as Lawson gets through, that's all that matters. We know he's been struggling this weekend, but elimination in Q1 is going to put him under severe pressure right away. As he understeered through the second part of the quick left-right chicane and got a bit of oversteer on the exit. That is going to cause him problems. It's not a great run through turn 11 either. I'm not sure Lawson is actually going to go any higher than 16th here. As he understeers onto the grass at the penultimate corner, and he comes into the pit lane. So he's out. Liam Lawson, at what pretty much is his home race, is out in Q1. What an absolutely horrible performance by the Kiwi, as George Russell has just gone second on a set of soft tyres, 1:15.9. Doesn't look like Behrman is going to get out there, so Lawson is going to end up in 19th place for tomorrow's race. What a disaster. As Yuki Tsunoda improves up to 6th place. That's a lot more like it from Racing Bulls. Here comes Antonelli. Can he get through? He goes 10th. I'm not sure if that's going to be good enough. It's going to be close, as Pierre Gasly comes out the drop zone and up to 8th. Here comes Isaac Hadjar, 14th currently. Where does he go? 9th. That should be good enough. Good session so far from Isaac Hadjar. Going right under the radar, he is. As Jack Doohan up to 8th. Great lap in front of his father and the home crowd. So at the moment, the two Saubers, Lawson and Ocon, and Behrman in the drop zone. Lawson and Behrman, we know, are out. But with the checkered flag having now fallen, who will make it through? Alex Albon will make it through. He's up to 7th. As Stroll goes 13th. Lewis Hamilton currently in 14th. He's on, though, a final lap where he should improve. As Antonelli now on the cusp of elimination, if the Saubers can get their act together, as Ocon has ended up 19th. So Lawson will be 18th. As Lewis Hamilton up to P6. He is through. And what about the two Saubers? Are they on a lap or not? Yes. Here we have Gabriel Bortoleto. He's improved his middle sector, but not improved the first sector. So will he actually be able to climb out of the drop zone on his debut weekend? Yes, he does. Bortoleto 15th, meaning that Kimi Antonelli, the generational talent we've all been talking about, eliminated in Q1 on his debut in Formula One. What a disappointment. Not necessarily all his own fault. Well, if it's a broken floor because he's ran wide, then yeah, it probably is his own fault. But Antonelli out in Q1. And Mercedes and a Red Bull eliminated in the first part of qualifying. That right there just shows you how mental of a season it's going to be and how mental of a session this is going to be. But guys, that is it for Q1. Let's go through the drivers that will be competing in the second part of qualifying. Lando Norris, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, Fernando Alonso, Jack Doohan, Pierre Gasly, Isaac Hadjar, Carlos Sainz, Lance Stroll, and Gabriel Bortoleto. And knocked out in Q1, Kimi Antonelli, Nico Hulkenberg, Liam Lawson, Esteban Ocon, and Oliver Behrman. Quite a headline, a pack of drivers eliminated there. I mean, Antonelli in the Mercedes, Hulkenberg, who's been so good, obviously in the midfield. Obviously, he's in a Sauber now, so we knew his form would drop off. But to be out qualified by Bortoleto, that is a surprise. Congratulations to Bortoleto. Brilliant final lap there to get himself into Q2. Doing exactly what he needs to do. Lawson 18th. I thought Lawson would struggle this weekend. I didn't think he'd be 18th. And then the two Haas's at the back. Yeah. A surprising start to qualifying. And that is only the first part. Still 2 more parts to come. And who knows what will happen. But remember, guys, make sure to vote in the poll at the top of the chat where I've asked you guys, who will take pole position for the Australian Grand Prix? Will it be Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri? Out of those 4 drivers, who do you think takes pole position? And Nib says, get doing in that Red Bull now. Yeah, I am happy for doing to get through. And ahead of Gasly as well. That's exactly what the team are expecting of him. Oh dear. Let's not move the order like that. I clicked the wrong source. That's why that happened. But Q2, of course, will be a 15-minute long session. I'll sync up the timer at the 14-minute mark. And we'll be knocking out the next 5 drivers. You would imagine Bortoleto will be one of those. Not because he's not good enough, but Sauber just don't have a good enough car. Both Alpines, I think, likely as well to get eliminated. And then probably one of the Aston Martins. And then probably one of the Racing Bulls as well. If I was to guess, I think that's what it will be. But who expected Antonelli and the Mercedes to be out in Q1? None of us is the answer to that. As Astra saying in the chat, as Lawson saying, had no tyres end of the lap. He also had no talent at the end of the lap. He completely ran out of that by the time he got to the penultimate corner. Yeah, absolutely great for Jack. I really hope he does at least perform to a really good level for the start of the season, because I would like doing to at least get a full season. Because, like I said, in F2, I thought he was good, and I did think, you know, he deserved a try in F1. He had earned that opportunity, and you know, he's a good lad. He's you know, he's of good quality, and hopefully takes the opportunity. As we're just doing SkyPad analysis of Liam Lawson. Would Sergio Perez have qualified 18th? I'm not quite sure he would have, but yeah. To be fair to Lawson, I think he has raced here before in Formula 2, but I don't think that was... I think that was a couple years ago. So maybe you could cut him some slack and say, oh, he's never raced here in a Formula 1 car. I mean, obviously, next weekend in Shanghai, he'll have it even worse, because I don't think he's ever... sorry, I don't think he's ever driven around that circuit. So probably won't get any better next week, but I expected at least him to get through to Q2 there. And that was just, yeah, absolutely terrible from Lawson, who's already speaking in the driver pen. I think at this point, we've all just come to the conclusion that it doesn't matter who's in the other Red Bull. none of them are going to get anywhere near Max. So, yeah. As we have, is it cars on track? I think Q2 has begun. And I think the first car on track is, yes, it is, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. So, hold on a sec. There you go. Showing off the second cut-off zone. I'll sync up the timer as soon as they actually start showing it. As also Leclerc on track. In a Ferrari car, which, if you didn't know, was sponsored by HP. I don't know if you guys did. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. But yeah, sponsored by HP. Just so you guys know, in case you were just wondering what the main sponsor of the Scuderia was for 2025. As Rook saying, this is what Mercedes said about Antonelli's session. We saw bib damage on Kimi's car. That's them talking about the underneath of the car. During his second run, that caused a loss of performance for his final 2 laps. Yeah. But I'm imagining he caused that by running wide on the replay that we saw. So, no excuses, I'm afraid. But it'll be fun to see him in the wet tomorrow. Possibly come through the field. But the best time of the weekend so far, a 1:59. Let's see who can go better than that here as Max flies his way through turn 6 and 7, I believe. As the DRS wide open on the approach to turn 9. And the Red Bull car needing a second bite of the cherry into the second part of that fast chicane. They're not all comfortable. But he's quicker on this lap so far compared to Leclerc. He's done 2 purple sectors. Leclerc slower. As Russell goes quickest. But not anymore. Because Max Verstappen does a 1:15.6. That is a very, very good lap time. Here comes Leclerc. 1:15.8. Not too bad, but maybe more on the table there. As Piastri only goes 4th. Here is Lewis Hamilton, who somehow has only, I think, won twice here, despite having so many pole positions. Lando Norris goes 3rd. Hamilton now, purple final sector, and he goes up to 3rd. As actually Russell and Norris have not, and Piastri have not done a lap time. They've just started a lap. So the only drivers that have done a lap so far are Verstappen and the 2 Ferraris of Leclerc and Hamilton. Hamilton, quarter of a second slower than Leclerc, by the way, on that lap. Here is George Russell. Can he fight for pole today? Only a 10th off Max on that lap, so looks like he can. Russell was on the front row here 2 years ago. I remember he did lead in 2023 the first few laps. Who knows what could have happened that day if it wasn't for the decision to pit under the, I think, red flag it was. And then obviously his engine gave way. As Alex Albon goes 4th, splitting the 2 Ferraris. Here comes Piastri, who goes quickest at 1:15.4. That is a really good lap time. 0.2 of a second quicker than Max. Here comes Lando Norris, who goes 2nd. Just under a 10th slower than Piastri. So it's Piastri quickest, Norris 2nd, and then 3rd Verstappen, and then Russell, Leclerc, Albon, Hamilton, and Sainz. As Alonso was on a lap and decided to come in. His teammate, though, is now coming through the final corner. What can Lance Stroll do? comes to the line, and this is a very slow lap time. A 1:17.0. That is not going to be anywhere near good enough to get into Q3. But he is, for now, in 9th place. As we've got Tsunoda, Doohan, Gasly, Hadjar, and Bortoleto on outlaps. We'll see what those drivers can do in the Melburnian heat. As Alonso, that's why he gave up on the lap. He ran wide at turn 10, almost fully into the gravel. And yeah, they'll need to check the floor on that. That might have damaged the floor on that Aston Martin, which will not help his mood. And here is the Williams of Sainz. Oh, slightly jumping in the air on the exit as he ran slightly wide. And he's just come on the radio to say, check the floor. And it will definitely need a check, as he was slower than Albon on that lap, maybe because of that. But yeah, we've now got Doohan, Gasly, Hadjar, and Bortoleto on flying laps, and now Tsunoda, so hopefully we can look at those rather than looking at Carlos Sainz in the pits. And here we go. Here is Isaac Hadjar, who's having a very underrated debut here. Outdoing the full-time debutants of Behrman and Antonelli already. And what's this lap? It puts him up to 9th place. Only 3/10 off Sainz. Not a bad first run for Q2. He will need to improve, though, if he wants to get into Q3, as Pierre Gasly goes up to 8th. Gasly, who could have had a podium here a couple years ago, looking in decent form with that lap. Jack Doohan, only 11th, quite far off the pace of his teammate. Nearly a second slower than his teammate, so that is a poor lap from Doohan. Bortoleto, poor lap from him, only 13th. Couple seconds off the pace of Piastri. And here comes Yuki Tsunoda. Can he get into the top 10? Yes, he can. 6th place. Only half a second off the pace and replicating the pace we saw of yesterday. And that's why I predicted him to be 6th on the grid for qualifying. And he's currently 6th, at least in Q2, ahead of Albon, Hamilton, Gasly, Sainz, who round out the top 10. As Doohan has had his lap time deleted. So Doohan back down to 15th. So in the drop zone with 6.5 minutes almost to go is Hadjar, Stroll, Bortoleto, Alonso, and Doohan. As here is Charles Leclerc, previous pole sitter and race winner here before, again in 2022. Needs to replicate that form this time around if he's going to be on pole. As Lewis Hamilton also is on a new flying lap. We saw last year Ferrari did tend to use scrubbed tyres for the first run of Q2 and then put on the fresh tyres for the second run in Q2. So I wonder if that's what they've done again, and maybe that's why they're a bit further off the pace. Leclerc not improved his middle sector, but he's only half a tenth off Piastri after 2 sectors. This probably on course to put Leclerc 3rd, which is not too bad considering it's not been his best lap. He did run slightly wide at turn 7. As through the final couple corners. DRS open now down the pit straight. And Leclerc, very bad final sector, doesn't even improve his lap time. Lewis Hamilton, though, surely he can improve. He does, up to 6th, but also tyres giving out clearly in the final sector because he did not improve his final sector either. But at least he's now, Hamilton, only a 10th slower than his teammate, which is, at worst, what you I think, really should tolerate with him. But yeah, 4.5 minutes to go now, and everyone in the pits except for the two Ferraris who have, I think, have done their best laps for Q2. They're just going to come back and get ready for Q3. Ferrari, though, at the minute, definitely not looking like pole position material. McLaren, I think, still are the clear favourites, but Red Bull and Mercedes are interesting me quite a lot with their pace. So that's a replay of Hadjar saying, and on the radio saying, check the floor, exit of turn 6, and also, yes, running slightly wide, just like Antonelli did. And here's a replay of Doohan, I presume. Yep, running wide on the exit of turn 12. That won't hurt the floor because it's just a curb. As all Tsunoda running slightly wide on the exit turn 6. The drivers pushing to the limits, and that's why we're seeing the gravel kicked up so much, because they're trying to use as much of the track as they can and get away with as much as they can to maximize lap time. But we have got 3.5 minutes remaining. And we are now coming into the final runs of Q2. Who will make it through to the top 10? To be honest, it's pretty likely it will remain the way it is. But we've just seen some, surprises in Q1. I'm sure we can get some in Q2. As actually, I'm just going to quickly, to avoid my TV because it's been on for a while going into standby mode, I'm just going to quickly turn it off and turn it back on again. Because my Skybox almost went into standby mode a few minutes ago. But we're looking currently at Bortoleto, again, your Formula 2 champion for 2024. And, I mean, Bortoleto currently 13th. If he ends up there, I think that's a very good debut qualifying session, as there is the Italian Harry Potter in the Sauber garage, Mattia Binotto, ready to cook up some more madness for 2026 when Audi step in. But here is Bortoleto. No pressure. Let's see what he can do on this final run. Pretty good run through turn 1 and 2. Now into turn 3. Looking good as well. Driving very nicely is Bortoleto. So just as I say that, exit at turn 4. Carrying way too much speed. Very aggressive. And yeah, that lap is dead. And I think he's backed off. Just as I was praising him for how well he was driving, he then goes and does that. So Bortoleto probably going to end up now 15th. But still, that's a good result. Because, the number one thing in Formula 1 is, beat your teammate. And then, further improvements you can work on from there. But as long as you're beating your teammate, you are doing a good enough job. And Bortoleto has beat his teammate today. As Lance Stroll, currently 12th, can he somehow make it into the top 10? So we've got a yellow flag out there somewhere. As Doohan has just flown through turn 9 and 10. He's on a slightly better lap as Lance Stroll stays in 12th, but Lewis Hamilton has spun on the exit of turn 11. And that is going to cost Jack Doohan the chance of making Q3, as his teammate then held him up a bit into the penultimate corner. But Doohan goes up to 13th, but he would have had to have lifted for the yellow flag. That is a shame for Doohan, because I think he could have maybe done a bit better there if that yellow flag had not come out. as the checkered flag has fallen. Who will make it through? Isaac Hadjar on 11th. Can he make it through? No, he can't. He just misses out. Good effort, though, in his debut weekend, as he remains 11th. Carlos Sainz goes up to P7, and Alex Albon stays in P9. As Fernando Alonso still out there. Is he on a lap? We'll have to see. Max Verstappen has done 2 purple sectors. Let's see what this lap will be. And Alonso has improved the middle sector, as Verstappen to the line. What's the lap time? It's quite a bit slower in the final sector, and he improves, I think, the lap time, but stays in third as Lando Norris now goes quickest. And Fernando Alonso qualifies his teammate, but misses out on Q3. As Gasly finishes his lap, he will be in P10, and a great job by Gasly to get through to Q3 when it wasn't necessarily expected that he would do so. As Lando Norris went quickest there with a 1:15.415. Here's a replay. Hamilton spinning on the exit turn 11, slightly understeering in, but just steps on the gas too early. And then spun around and obviously flat spotting his tyres. Not great. But Q2 is over and done with. Let me go through the drivers who will be in the top 10 shootout. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly, and knocked out in Q2, Isaac Hadjar, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, Jack Doohan, and Gabriel Bortoleto. And Q3, guys, will be underway in about 2 to 3 minutes from now. Great effort, by the way, from Hadjar. That's a good effort. Really good effort for the first race. Good effort. Really good effort, though, from Tsunoda to, deliver on the pace of the car. Get himself right in that top 10. He could end up on the 4th row of the grid here. He really could. And that would be an outstanding qualifying session to start the season. Also, great job by Gasly. Again, in an Alpine that did not look necessarily likely to get into the top 10, but he's done it. Williams, also congrats to their drivers, and Williams clearly showing that they do have the fastest car in the midfield. I think just about ahead of Racing Bulls and Alpine. So great for Williams. And if Williams could lock out the 4th row, that would be brilliant for tomorrow. Especially if they could hold on to that. That'd be 10 points in the race, which would be a great start to the season for Williams Racing. But in terms of who can get pole, I still think it's McLaren's to lose, but Verstappen and Russell, I think, definitely can get it. I think Leclerc can, but I don't feel like Leclerc has really nailed a lap yet so far in this session. So we'll see in Q3 whether he can. We've seen him before deliver some outstanding final laps in qualifying. And maybe he'll be able to do that in a few moments' time. But let me finish up the poll in the chat where I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Australian Grand Prix, because there is a clear winner. And despite my doubts currently, after 342 votes, you guys have voted. Well, 36% of the vote has gone to Charles Leclerc, who wins the vote. So the majority of you still believe in the Monegasque and the Ferrari team. Norris second, 27%. Verstappen third, 24%. Piastri fourth on 11%. If Ferrari get pole, it would be absolutely brilliant, but it's not looking very likely, I have to say, as the session goes on. It's looking even less likely as the session goes on. By the way, we're on 37 likes. Let's try, if we can, in the next 20 minutes and try and get up to 50 plus likes if we can. That'd be great if we could do that. Obviously, your likes help the channel grow in the algorithm. And as Russell there noted for possible impeding, I don't think he'll get a penalty for that, though. Yeah, your likes help the channel and the algorithm, help the channel grow, and again, helps show me that you guys still enjoy the content. But yeah, Q3 underway in a moment, and it'll be a 12-minute long session, and I'll sync it up at the 11-minute mark. But we've got both McLarens, both Ferraris, both Williamses, and then one Red Bull, one Mercedes, one Racing Bulls, and one Alpine. As Sky F1 analysing why Hamilton spun, which obviously they're going to do that because, British television channel, but it's not really important why he spun because it doesn't matter. And what they are going to show, though, is how it affected Jack Doohan. Yellow flags coming into turn 11. And to be fair, I don't think it doesn't look like Doohan backed off at all. But he definitely got held up to a degree by Gasly here through the penultimate corner. Would have been distracted, and it would have been a slight bit of dirty air as well to contend with. But yeah. As I think they're now about to show Sky a interview with Antonelli, who, I'm pretty sure cost himself the chance at a decent result today because he damaged his own floor. But I think really for Antonelli, I mean, given where he's starting from, as long as he scores points, finishes, say, in the top 8, I think that's a decent start to the season, especially given the weather conditions tomorrow are likely to be very tricky. So, yeah, it would have been better if he started, obviously, in a decent position. But, yeah. It is only his first race. We can't expect Lewis Hamilton levels of great starts to Formula One careers, with everyone. So, yeah. As out comes the teammate of Antonelli, George Russell, who has never had pole in Melbourne. Like I said, he was very close here in 2023, got on the front row in a weekend where he was absolutely brilliant. And as we have to remember with Russell, he has just come off the back of, I think, the best season of his career in 2024. So the form and the confidence that Russell has is very, very high. As there you go, 11 minutes remain in qualifying. Who will take pole in Melbourne? As we're now seeing Max Verstappen entering the field. Car number 1. And the car and the driver they all want to beat. As Gasly saying on the radio, it looks pretty dark. I'm pretty sure there isn't going to be any rain. Doesn't seem to be really any wind. And yeah, I just don't think there's going to be any rain. There's none forecast, so I don't see why there would be. You never know in Melbourne. Weather systems can just come out of nowhere. That's what it's famous for. As Oscar Piastri starts his first attempt at pole at home. Into turn 3 he comes. Smashes the apex. Very good front end on the McLaren. And Piastri. Very good first sector. And not running too wide on the exit of turn 6. This is a good lap so far. Whether it's the best, well, it isn't at the moment, because Lando Norris has gone slightly quicker in the first sector. As Piastri flies through turn 9 and 10. No issues of grip through there. As Norris quicker than Piastri in the middle sector as well. Piastri uses all of the road on the exit of turn 11. He's giving it everything. As Leclerc now does a purple middle sector. As Piastri runs too wide at the penultimate corner, clips the grass. That would have cost him 2 or 3 tenths at least. As Piastri comes to the line, and it's a 16.1. That is not a good lap. As here comes his teammate Norris. A 1:15.9, which is half a second slower than Norris was in Q2. Leclerc now goes quickest as Lando Norris has his lap time deleted. Leclerc quickest on a 1:15.7. Here comes George Russell. He goes quickest by half a tenth on a 1:15.6 as Verstappen doing purple sectors. Hamilton only 4th and 6 tenths off the pace. Where on earth is his pace? As here comes the world champion, who just about puts it on provisional pole by a 1/4 tenth. Verstappen strikes early. As Sainz goes up to 6th on a 17.3, surely on old tyres. But Max, this is why he's world champion. This is why he was champion last year. As Gasly goes 6th, only slightly slower than Lewis Hamilton. And Albon goes up to 5th, splitting Piastri and Hamilton. What a lap from Albon. As there's where Norris exceeded track limits. Turn 4, unnecessary from Lando. That lap anyway would not have been quick enough to put him on provisional pole. So McLaren under-delivering quite a bit with those first runs. But what I was about to say with Max is that right there is why Max is the world champion. Because when it's time to deliver, Max delivers. And right there, delivered the lap. McLaren, so far, have not. And if they go on to not deliver a good enough lap, as Tsunoda up to 6th. Albon and Tsunoda on the 3rd row of the grid currently. Incredible scenes. Yeah, if McLaren go on to not quite deliver the lap, then, well, it's just continuation of last year, isn't it? McLaren throwing away good opportunities and Max delivering when he most needs to. And again, that's why he is the 4-time consecutive world champion. But there is one more run to go, and there is still plenty of time for McLaren to get pole or even maybe the front row. There is still time for Russell to get Mercedes' first pole in Melbourne in 6 years. Leclerc and Ferrari could still get pole position. As a replay of Max at turn 4 in his lap, just keeping it within the track limits. Absolutely brilliant stuff. As I can hear the birds tweeting outside. That's just about, as is, what do you call it? It's just about before 6 o'clock in the morning here in the UK. Just about getting light outside as it gets darker and darker in Melbourne. At least for Piastri, though, he has a time on the board, even though it was a poor lap. As McLaren don't know if they're properly fixing the floor or just doing some slight fixes. I'm not quite sure, but Lando Norris, as usual, has put himself under a lot of pressure unnecessarily. And, well, if he doesn't get pole, you could absolutely argue that he's thrown it away, just like he did a lot of times with race wins and the odd pole position here and there back last year, which really hurt his championship bid. As that's a replay of Hamilton on his lap, touching gravel on the exit at turn 11. Hamilton surely can do better than 7th on the grid. That is absolutely shocking. I think with Hamilton, he needs to be 5th at worst. Given that he's clearly slower than Leclerc and off the pace of Leclerc, he needs to be at least in the top 5 to give himself at least a good podium chance on Sunday, if Ferrari, of course, have got any pace. As the cars make their way out slowly onto track in these final 3.5 minutes for the final run of qualifying. Can Max maintain pole? Will McLaren take the pole that they are probably favourites for? Will Mercedes and Russell get a surprise pole? Will Ferrari get pole? This is exactly why we are so excited for this season, because we have got 4 different teams who could legitimately take pole in these next 3 minutes. And if that keeps up for the whole season, this season could be one of the greatest of all time. As Max, currently on provisional pole, and if he was to get pole, it would be 3 years in a row of pole position for Max Verstappen here in Melbourne. And there's only 3 drivers in the top 10 who have got pole here before. Verstappen, Leclerc, and of course, Lewis Hamilton. So they won't feel the pressure as much at getting pole here. As here comes the McLaren of, is it Lando Norris? As there is Yuki Tsunoda just filtering onto the track. He should get out of the way pretty quickly for Norris. Or sorry, Piastri when he gets up to him. Has brilliant grip from the McLaren through turn 1 and 2. Can Oscar, with his final attempt, get pole in front of the home crowd as Lando Norris has started his run also? And Piastri for the first sector. Slightly slower than Verstappen, but only by 1/4 of a tenth. Remember, the final sector is McLaren's strongest sector. So as long as they're in touch in the final first 2 sectors, then they're fine. As Norris nearly 1/10 up on Max after the first sector. That is the perfect start for Lando. As Piastri down to turn 11. As Lando still up on Max after the first 2 sectors. Max has not improved his first sector, but is only slightly slower than what he's done before. Piastri, through the final couple corners, can he deliver pole here in Australia? And for now he does! 1/2 second quicker than Verstappen. What's Lando Norris going to do though? He gets onto pole by 0.08 of a second. McLaren, for the minute, are on the front row. Verstappen, though, has done a purple middle sector. Surely he cannot get himself onto pole as Russell goes 3rd. Here comes Verstappen. And no, he doesn't improve enough in the final sector and ends up 3rd, nearly 0.4 of a second away from pole. 1:15.0 from Norris. McLaren producing unbelievable pace right when they need it. Gasly goes up to 6th. Leclerc is pitted. He couldn't improve. He's currently 5th. Lewis Hamilton goes 6th. Ferrari only on the 3rd row. That is a disaster, as far as I'm concerned. Carlos Sainz goes up to 8th. Alex Albon goes 5th. Alex Albon has outqualified both Ferrari drivers. And Williams outqualify Ferrari in Melbourne. Incredible from Alex Albon. And right there, Yuki Tsunoda goes 5th. Incredible. Tsunoda 5th, Albon 6th, Ferrari 7th and 8th. A horror show at the Scuderia. But Tsunoda delivers on the pace he showed yesterday. And Albon, I was about to say, Efron's questioned whether he can match Sainz. And look at what he's just done there. 6th on the grid. Have that, he'll be saying, towards Carlos Sainz. But what a final run of qualifying that was. And let me take you through what will be your starting grid. And what a starting grid it is for tomorrow's wet Australian Grand Prix. McLaren take the front row. And I predicted correctly, thankfully. Lando Norris on pole. Oscar Piastri 2nd. Max Verstappen 3rd. We disappointed that he wasn't closer, but in the wet, he'll know that he's got a chance tomorrow. Russell 4th. He'll be satisfied with that. Tsunoda 5th. Albon 6th. Absolutely brilliant from the pair of them. Leclerc 7th. Hamilton 8th. Ferrari have had an absolute horror show performance. Gasly 9th. Sainz 10th. And then Hadjar 11th. Alonso 12th. Stroll 13th. Doohan 14th. Bortoletto 15th. Antonelli 16th. And then Hulkenberg 17th. Lawson 18th. Ocon 19th. And Oliver Behrman will start last. Wow. What a end to the session. And let me start up, guys, that drive of the day's vote. By the way, we're on 47 likes. If you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. Let's get up to 50 if we can before the end of the stream. Who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Australia? And the driver of the day choices will be Lando Norris. I'm going to put George Russell in there because, you know, Mercedes had their struggles so far this weekend. I think Russell has still done a good job, but the other two options for driver of the day have to be Yuki Tsunoda and Alexander Albon. And my driver of the day is Yuki Tsunoda, 100%. Even though, yeah, the Racing Bulls car has been pretty quick this weekend, I did not think that he would out-qualify both Ferrari cars. I mean, I did predict him to be 6th, but I just thought the circumstances would be quite a bit different. But both Ferraris out-qualified by Tsunoda and Albon. 4th row of the grid for Ferrari. That is the worst qualifying result they have had here in Melbourne since, I think, 2014. Which was 11 years ago at the very start. The first race that was of the hybrid V6 era. That was the last time they had a qualifying result here in Melbourne that was as bad. They will improve tomorrow. Obviously, they are quicker than where they ended up. But, yeah, disaster for Ferrari. Yanni's saying mine is Yuki too. How long until Yuki replaces Lawson? Yeah. They would have done it. They would have put Tsunoda in that Red Bull by now if they were actually serious about it, but they've clearly proven they're not, unfortunately. Drew saying, I've listened to a few channels over the years. This is the best watch-along content around. Nice work, Chazza. Thank you very much for that. Much, much appreciated. As Nibble is saying, fucking boo. He was close, Piastri. It was a really good lap, but Lando just extra bit quicker. But Oscar, remember last year when he was right up there with Lando, there were quite a few races where Oscar outdid Lando on the race day, and that's all that matters. So if Oscar tomorrow can get the jump on Lando, who remember is a infamously bad starter from pole, if Oscar can get the jump, there's no reason why Piastri cannot win tomorrow's Grand Prix, especially with McLaren as quick as they are. And with the grip they've got, they should be able to cope pretty well in the conditions. But I'm sure that Verstappen and Russell will be right in there as well. But, yeah, I can see Tsunoda already doing well in that poll. Make sure to keep getting your votes in. And Drew also saying that he said a 1:15.1 for pole. And yeah, you were almost correct. It was a 1:15.0, which is, I think, about 0.3 of a second quicker than I expected. I thought it would be at best a 15.3. A 15.0 is, yeah, mental. Max ended up doing a 15. Was it 15.3 or 15.4? So, I mean, Max did what I thought was going to be pole, but McLaren on that final lap unlocked that extra pace that they have at the moment over Red Bull in dry running. But I think Max will be very satisfied with the result he's got and knowing that it's going to be a wet race tomorrow. He knows without a doubt that he can win tomorrow's race. Whether he will or not is obviously a completely different story, but I think he'll be very satisfied again with how things played out. Because I think Red Bull were fearing maybe not even being on the second row of the grid. But they are right there behind the two McLarens, ready to pounce. And Woden saying, nice one, Shaz. I'll catch you tomorrow for the race. Absolutely. By the way, before some of you go, just a reminder, I will be live tomorrow at 2 a.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race begins for a race build-up. And then, of course, the watch-along beginning of the race begins, obviously, at 4 a.m. here in the UK. And obviously, I'll take you to the Grand Prix and hopefully a great Grand Prix tomorrow. And then remember, on Monday, I'll be uploading my podcast review of the Australian Grand Prix race/weekend. Rook saying Max has got Russell and Tsunoda behind him. What could go wrong? Verstappen and Russell on the same row of the grid is definitely spicy. That's the first time they've been on the same row of the grid since their spat coming out of the Qatar Grand Prix. So, see what happens there. Drew, I think, saying Albon for their driver of the day. As Lando Norris has just about taken over the driver of the day winning vote at the moment. But yeah, what a first day, qualifying day of the season. Who thought we would have the grid we have for this first Grand Prix? After all the hype, Ferrari 7th and 8th, Antonelli in 16th. McLaren, the quickest in qualifying, which is not really that big of a change, obviously, from last year. They were the Kings in qualifying last year, but yeah. What a grid we have for what should be a very good race tomorrow. Make sure to join me again for that at the times that Rooks is currently posting in the chat. And yeah, make sure to join us so we can enjoy together the first Grand Prix of 2025, which hopefully will set the benchmark and give us the hook for the season ahead that we really need. But let me just finish up this poll in the chat that has just about, after not a ton of votes, but just about, it's been won by Yuki Tsunoda, I believe. Let me wait for the poll. There you go. 18 votes and driver of the day in Australia here in qualifying. Just about 44% of the vote, Yuki Tsunoda. 38% for Lando Norris. 11% for Alex Albon. And then 5% for George Russell. And I agree, Tsunoda driver of the day. Absolutely brilliant performance. Once again proving that he is one of the top midfield drivers. And probably, you could say at this point, one of the top 10 best drivers in Formula One. But yeah, what a session we've had here. Make sure, guys, to join me for tomorrow for what should be a brilliant day. Thank you guys for all coming along for this qualifying watch along. I hope to see you tomorrow for the race watch along again. Going live at 2 a.m. UK time. Race begins at 4 a.m. in the UK. Make sure to join me for that. Again, thanks for coming along for this stream. And until the first Grand Prix tomorrow in the wet around the street circuit of Albert Park, a race that should deliver quite a bit of excitement. Until then, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.